Now is California Democrat Congressman Adam Schiff, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman. We heard Ash Carter say that so far the U.S. has trained only 60 rebel Syrian fighters. He admitted that that number is not impressive, but he blamed it on the vetting process. Are you surprised by that number, only 60?
Well, I'm not surprised because we've been briefed about the progress or lack of progress in the program for some time. It is painfully slow. And it has to cause us, I think, to think about whether this is really viable. At the same time, I think Ash Carter and General Dempsey are exactly right. We can't substitute American boots on the ground for local forces because while we can do that and win the battles, they won't stay won. And if we're looking for something enduring, we're going to need local forces and local government to step up here. And
we heard President Obama talk about that yesterday, saying the goal is to train of these rebel Syrian fighters. But do you think that that is key in this fight against ISIS?
I do think it's key. The challenge is, though, that the population there, they want to fight against the regime. They also want to do combat with ISIS, but that's a secondary concern for them. Their primary concern is this government that's been barrel bombing them. So that's why it's been very hard to recruit. It's also hard to find people that are moderate. It's hard to find people that you can adequately vet. We want to make sure, obviously, that the weapons and training we give them don't end up going to join ISIS. As we've seen in Iraq, a lot of our weaponry ended up in ISIS hands.
Absolutely, we saw that. And you mentioned the regime. We heard President Obama also talk about that yesterday, saying that the next step in Syria has to be taken to get rid of Assad, essentially. How important do you think that is? And when do you think that could actually happen realistically?
I think it's critical because as long as Assad is in power there isn't going to be an end to that civil war. And as that civil war rages on, there's always going to be space for ISIS. I do think we are starting to see cracks in Alawite support for the regime. I think ultimately Russia and even Iran are going to have to come around to the conclusion, which seems pretty obvious at this point, that Assad is never going to rule a unified Syria again. So either Syria is going to be balkanized, or if we want one Syria, and if that's best for the region and as well as the powers in the region, then we need to find a way to transition Assad out of power. I think that's the only way this horrible war comes to an end.
As we continue to fight ISIS, now it's been, around a year we've been going through this process. Something you've been pushing for is the authorization of military force against ISIS in both Syria and Iraq. Do you think that that is critical in order to defeat ISIS?
I think it's less, frankly, about the military strategy, less necessary for the military strategy than it is, frankly, to uphold our constitutional duty. We have the obligation to declare war. It's astonishing to me that we're having this conversation, as you point out, about a year from these hostilities, and we've never had a vote on it in Congress. That's appalling. And that not only has repercussions, I think, for this war, but it has very important repercussions in the future because other presidents can decide they no longer need to go to Congress to make war, and that would be a terrible change in the balance of power in our government.
Congressman Schiff, thank you so much for coming on to talk with us.
Thank you.
And in today's hearing,